So this is a short talk called Whig History of Einstein's Physics. So I've been distracted by lots of things at the moment, but I wanted to make this short video. Science stroke physics suffers from Whig's history, and that is a false history. So when they start, physicists and scientists so forth, they want to talk about history backing up what they say, but what they do is they create a false history, and that is called a Whig history. And that Whig history makes it seem natural what they're saying. So this is the book that is usually thought to bring to attention people the idea of Whig history. It's by Herbert Butterfield, and it refers to this idea of false history. And it's there is a political group called the Whigs, and its history in the way they wanted to interpret it. The Whigs wanted their own version of history, and they wanted to interpret history their way, hence Whig's history. So this is what the book says about Whig history, which has been brought to your attention by Butterfield. And it says, writing in 1931, his ideas went on to become a very important concept within the historiography, the study of how history has been written. Once the reader understands Butterfield's arguments, they might start to see Whiggish history in other things they read. So the idea of Whiggish history got generalised. It's a biased view of history. And this is what Wikipedia says. In science, it has been argued that the historiography of science is riddled with Whiggish history. Like other Whig histories, Whig history of science tends to divide historical actors into good guys who are on the side of the truth and bad guys who oppose the emergence of those truths because of their ignorance or bias. Science is seen as emerging from a series of victories over pre-scientific thinking. In other words, to some extent, the history gets written by the winners, who want to then impose their point of view on how history should be interpreted. So history presented by science is biased in favour of what scientists want to believe. Hence, Einstein is a good guy. Scientists want to favour him as right as often as can. So this is an article in physics education, history and quasi-history in physics education. And quasi-history seems to be another way of saying Whig history. This is what the article says. Why do we teach physics? Our primary aim, presumably, is that the students should gain an understanding of physical principles and techniques and their application. A secondary aim of most teachers would be that the students should obtain an appreciation of the significance of the scientific approach, the various revolutions in man's understanding of nature, the way in which science is carried on today, and its place in modern life. And he goes on and he says, one might naively assume that it's the pursuit of this secondary aim that in addition to being exposed to a large amount of strictly scientific information, the student will be asked to digest a smaller but not insubstantial amount of material which is historical or proposed to be historical or seems to be historical. But this is far from true. In some cases there is certainly a genuine desire on the part of the author or lecturer to pass on the history of the subject. It is merely unfortunate that such attempts are often unsatisfactory. So, trying to teach history in science lessons, i.e. the science of the history, is usually unsatisfactory. And the article goes on to say, in this article I shall discuss another type of material which looks historical but in which there is no attempt to convey history truthfully. The aim is solely to put over scientific facts, and the history is there to provide a framework inside which the scientific facts fit easily, appear to make sense, and may be easily remembered for examination purposes. And so science history is being falsified to try to get across certain scientific ideas. And now looking at examples connected with Einstein. And this is carrying on from the article from Whitaker. Various authors have discussed quasi-history, and that shows that the widespread belief expressed or at least suggested in a large number of textbooks that Einstein's theory of special relativity was motivated by the null result of the Michelson-Morley experiment is fallacious. He uses the term implicit history of science. He brings out strikingly the point that Michelson's result could well be of decisive importance in convincing the physicists of the time and the student of today of the truth of relativity, and yet could have played little or no part in Einstein's own thinking. So what is really being done is many educators like to give a false history and say the Michelson-Morley experiment led to Einstein's special theory of relativity. But when you read Einstein's special relativity when it's published in 1905, there is no mention of the Michelson-Morley experiment. It is being good by physicists to give the impression that the Michelson-Morley experiment led to special relativity, and that's to make out that experimental result led to a new theory of Einstein. But that is just Whig history, false history in other words. So Whitaker carries on and says a few more examples of quasi-history follow, starting with Einstein's theory of the photoelectric effect. It is a fair presentation of the physics of this to present Planck's work in a clear form and to give the modern experimental evidence, but it is quasi-history at its worst to imply that Einstein had access to these developed theoretical concepts and detailed experimental results. In fact, at the time of Einstein's work, Planck's ideas were not thoroughly understood or accepted, and the experimental evidence was meagre and lacking in clarity and accuracy. So basically, some physicists like to present the false impression that Planck's work led to Einstein's work on the photoelectric effect, and that's just more Whig history. In this article by Stephen Weinberg, he points out some of Einstein's mistakes, and one of the interesting things is this, taking the relevant bit and it's referring to Whig history. Weinberg says, a historian reading the foregoing, that's the article which Weinberg has, in a first draft of this article, commented that I might be accused of perpetuating Whig history. The term Whig history was coined in a 1931 lecture by the historian Butterfield. According to Butterfield, Whig historians believe that there is an unfolding logic in history, and they judge the past by the standards of the present. So Weinberg next tries to excuse himself as being allowed to use Whig history for science/physics. So Weinberg says this, but it seems to me that although Whiggery, which is Whig history, is to be avoided in political and social history, which is what concerned Butterfield, it has a certain value in the history of science. So Weinberg thinks it's okay to give a Whig history of science, and the idea of that is to trying to get across the scientific ideas and not worry about the history being accurate, but instead distort the history. So scientists have a strong tendency to deal with Whig history, i.e. lie about the history. When deceived by a Whig history account of Einstein's relativity, it can seem a natural development. When presented with the actual history, it seems totally unnatural and bogus. So that's it, the end. Thank you.